Moving on, as a writer myself, I've always had trouble naming characters, but sometimes you meet somebody and they have one of those names that sounds like they should be out there solving crimes. And when they say their name, you want them, you kind of want them to say their job title with it, you know what I mean? Like Orange Scrivello, DDS, Bob Vance, Vance Refrigeration, Fawn Moscato, City Council, you know? Our next speaker has one of those names. Are you guys ready for it? Bridgette Powers. Attorney at law, or Detective Bridgette Powers, or Special Agent, I don't know. But Bridgette is aiming for a different title, Sister Bridgette. Bridgette graduated from St. Ben's in 2009, went to the School of Theology and got her master's in Divinity from St. John's, and is currently a postulant in St. Benedict's Monastery. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows, as we've come to learn here. If Bridgette were running for office, she really wouldn't want you to know of her days back in her hometown when she would accidentally drag Main Street. And I think that means that's when you're racing someone and they don't know it? I'm not really sure. Please welcome Bridgette Powers, Master of Divinity.
I will be presenting Millennial in the Monastery, joining a religious community in the 21st century. And look at that beautiful dome. Isn't it gorgeous? Oh. And I mean, I've become to know this dome a lot better recently. I'm from Montevideo, Minnesota. I graduated from St. Ben's in 2009 with a degree in theology, and then I minored in secondary education in Spanish. Later, I went to the St. John's School of Theology and got my Master's of Divinity. And since August, I have been a postulant at St. Ben's, which is the beginning sort of formation piece of becoming a sister. And I feel very, very blessed to be doing this, and I feel a lot of joy to it. So what draws a millennial to the monastery? Especially when in 2016, there are so many opportunities for women. And seriously, what about this celibacy thing? For me, it's about seeking God with a community of women who are going for the same goal, seeking God. And we do this especially through our Lectio Divina, which is holy reading. We do this through our communal prayers every day and our common life. So I know that I equate it kind of to marriage. I know that there are sisters there supporting me in my joys and my sorrows, and we're there for each other. So how did I come to become a sister? Well, it's kind of a winding road. I went to a camp called Youth in Theology and Ministry at St. John's when I was in high school. And that's where I got introduced to Benedictines, or religious life. And I think that also really influenced my choice to go to St. Ben's, where I studied theology. And one day, I was walking with my roommate, Mara, and I said to her, "Mara, I could be happy here forever." And that comment blew my mind. I had no idea where it came from, none at all. I hadn't been thinking about religious life at all, but it stuck with me. And so after graduating, I went to Chicago and volunteered for a year with Dominican Volunteers USA. And the unique thing about Dominican Volunteers is that you get to live with Dominicans and other volunteers. But I watched the lives that the sisters lived, the Dominicans, and I just thought, you know, that's not really the expression of religious life I want to live. Or as I like to think, the Benedictines wouldn't do it this way. And so later I went to St. John's School of Theology, and I had this roommate. And one day we dared each other to go to morning prayer at the Abbey. And I think it was a like who can get up earlier kind of thing. But that kind of set things in motion. And about 3 months in, I realized I'm going to have to give this up. I really like this. What am I going to do? But then this little voice inside my head said, you don't have to give it up. And then I thought, oh boy, I know what that means. There's a monastery down the street. So part of the beautiful part of our monastic life is our daily rhythm. And so that starts at 7 a.m. with morning prayer. We work, and so that work varies from sister to sister. So depending on their education, their interests, and what the community needs. So right now I'm working in the museum at the monastery, and which is work I never thought I would do. And I also nanny for a family in St. Joseph and do housekeeping. And then what I think is really cool is that at about 7:25, 11:25, I'm sorry, stops. And everyone goes to midday prayer. And we stop for work. And it's just wonderful. We stop our work and it's just wonderful. And then we stop again at 5 for Mass and 7 for evening prayer again. And then we have some time for community or personal time to get things done. And I think this really accentuates how God is in our lives and lets us see that. So as the rule of Benedict says, that in all things, God may be glorified. And I really think that our schedule, our rhythm, helps us to understand this and experience it in a really, really deep way. And it draws also people who aren't monastics to this way of life. We have people in the Spirituality Center who always say, wow, that rhythm is just so beautiful. How can I integrate that into my own life? And that's kind of where our oblates come into play too. They also want to live that rhythm. So the process of becoming a sister can be kind of long. It starts with becoming an affiliate, and that's a 6-month to 2-year long process. And it's a time where you live with the community, you don't live with the community, but you get to be a part of the prayer and work and intentionally be with the community. And then is the postulancy, and that's where I am right now. And so as a postulant, you live in the community, you work, you pray, you become part of the life. And then as you go through your postulancy, you can ask to become a novice. And that is a year of deep, deep discernment. It asks a lot of stability of the candidate. And that stability is asked through requiring you to stay on campus for a year, except for 5 days at Christmas. And then through your novitiate, you can ask to become a first professed, which is a time of continued discernment, but you're pretty integrated into the community. You're a part of what's going on there and the life there. And then, as I like to say, if they like you and you like them, they put a ring on it. And that ring that the sisters wear is a symbol of our loyalty to the Benedictine way of life and to each other and to our life together, seeking God and really engaging with one another and the world in that same great process. And it can be a long process, and so it's a great way of discernment. So what are the learnings as a millennial that I have experienced? Well, one of them is that silence is very, very important. It's important to disconnect from your Instagram, your Snapchat, your Twitter, and to really focus on those around you and God. And it helps that focus to be really special in that relationship. Next, I've learned that love and family can be very different than you ever anticipated. So the best part of this experience has been community. I get to live and be with some of the most incredible women I know. And there's nothing better than that. But also, it's the most challenging part for me. And more specifically, for me, it's the age gap. Because the average age of the sisters there is about 78. And I'm going on 30. So we lived in completely different times and completely different spaces. And so it's an interesting conversation to kind of pull together. Next that I think is really important is ora et labora. And it's work and prayer. And that we can appreciate God and in the dignity of our work, right? And we can really see that in the moderation that's practiced in the Benedictine way of life. So there is a time for prayer. There's a time for community. There's a time for work. And all of these are really important to how we live our lives and how we approach the world. And it's a great way of life and a great discernment that is part of our life. So I want to thank you very much for having me here. And just to thank you, and these are the beautiful women that I get to live with at St. Ben's in the Formation House. So thank you very much.